Welcome back to session number 6, the second one in the afternoon, in our little Strategies for Success EY Insights into Key Trends. And we have a really interesting one for this session. It's around managed services and specifically on tax managed services. I'm joined by 3 experts, Virginie, Greg, and Thilo. Really looking forward to the session. And maybe we just start and kick it off with a little introduction. So Virginie, maybe you want to go first?
Thank you. Good afternoon, Tim. I'm Virginie Casals. I'm the partner leading our global compliance and reporting practice in Switzerland. And I have 20 years designing, implementing, leading global managed services contract.
Really great to have you. Thank you. Greg?
Thanks, Tim. Nice to be here. I'm Craig Mitchell. I'm a partner in our EMEA Tax Managed Services leadership team. Been working with EY now for about 12 years, working with clients to transform their operating models and look to find value from the transformation in the tax and finance function with the managed service offering. Prior to that, I worked in industry for 2 listed groups. I was the head of tax, head of transfer pricing, and CFO of various parts of 2 US and UK listed companies. So great to be here today.
Great. Thanks for making time. Thilo?
Hello, this is Thilo Gauch. Since 2010, I'm looking back, this is almost 15 years. I'm doing managed services deals across continental Europe. In Switzerland, I was focusing mainly on pharma, chemicals, manufacturing, and financial services industries. And since 2021, I'm leading a finance managed service program for Accelleron. We will see that a little bit later this session.
Indeed, we'll come back to that one. Maybe we kick it off with a fairly easy question, really basic. What is managed services actually, Virginie?
Well, not that simple, Tim, but I'll try to answer in a simple way. I think at its core, it's about the outsourcing of specific business services or business processes to an external service provider, so a third party. And basically, if you look at services, the traditional model is more on an ad hoc basis, so where you look at advisory or projects. Managed services is about recurring. So recurring services, establishing long-term partnership, and typically those contracts are 5 to 7 years long. Now, as part of those contracts, the supplier takes responsibility for all or part of a process or a function. And that goes across IT, finance, tax. So we're talking about finance managed services, tax managed services, employee managed services, you get it. Everything that is recurring, that is a repetitive process, lends itself to managed services.
Here we go. So maybe before we dive into all the great examples, Thilo, that you have prepared, I know, Craig, I know that we've run the TFO survey, the Tax and Finance Operations survey. There's a lot of good insights, but just coming from your background as well, why is it important for business to think about managed services?
Yeah, so it's interesting. Managed services has been around for many, many years, but it's definitely a transformative weapon, if you like, or arrow in your quiver to kind of tackle some of the challenges that clients encounter. So, EY, every year we run a survey, or we've been doing this, I think, since 2018, 2019. So we've got a fairly rich history of data. But in the last one in 2024, we surveyed 1,600 companies across about 32 countries and 18 industries. We typically survey heads of tax, chief financial officers, group controllers, people working in the tax space to learn from them what they're struggling with, what challenges they're wrestling with, also learn from them what are they succeeding with and getting right. But ultimately looking to pull together key themes out of that survey to see where tax and finance functions are heading, but also to inform us about how, as advisors, we can better help them to address some of the challenges that they encounter. So generally, a lot of really, really rich and interesting data that comes out of that. From the latest survey, the challenges that emerged were around AI, so looking at what Gen AI is going to do to the tax and finance function. There's a continued theme has been talent over the years that keeps coming through, challenges with cost, and then transparency and regulation. So those four key themes came out fairly strongly in the latest survey.
Makes perfect sense. Probably worth diving into these 4 challenges. So I think, Greg, you can kick us off with AI maybe.
Yeah, sure. So Well, AI is an interesting one. It's probably where we've seen the biggest shift in the 7 years I've been doing this in one particular statistic. So in the latest survey, 87% of our clients said that they expect Gen AI to substantially impact and positively transform their function, driving efficiencies, driving tax function effectiveness. And just to color that a little bit, in the 2023 survey, that statistic was 15%. So that's a 72 percentage point increase. It's the biggest swing I've ever seen in one statistic. But at the same time, what we found, there's a different series of questions we asked. 75% of the respondents are either somewhere between nowhere or very exploratory stages in trying to figure out how they can use Gen AI within the context of their tax and finance function. Not unsurprising to see that. It kind of feeds into the talent gap discussion a little bit as well, because obviously people who need to work with Gen AI, it's a new skill set, a new capability. But when you see some of the feedback we got on people, 70% of our clients were saying they're being impacted by seeing fewer finance professionals or people going into the finance profession, not wanting to get into becoming an accountant or a qualified accountant. During COVID, we had the Great Resignation. I often joke with my friends, I say accountants decided they wanted to become farmers and hairdressers rather than be accountants. Because let's face it, that, I suppose, could be quite interesting becoming a farmer. I'm not so sure I'd want to be a hairdresser, given that I don't have much hair. But really interesting to see that flip. But when you go through that a little bit further, what that then has driven is we see 62% of the respondents coming back and saying, we're actually starting to recruit people that haven't gone to university, don't have a college degree, bringing in talent fresh out of school or just fresh out of their break from school, which is quite a big shift as well. It's certainly not the profession I grew up in, where degrees were really, really important. And two other interesting facts that have emerged over the last few years was around what's happened in the US, where we saw in 2019, it was almost 3/4 of the qualified CPAs reached retirement age. That's a fairly large number of people turning up all at one point needing to exit the profession. And then at the moment, they're about 340,000 short in terms of the number of accountants and auditors that they need in the US. So talent's a really big challenge at the moment. Where that takes you, what then comes alongside that is cost pressure. For the first time in the history of the survey, cost has come out as the number one pressure that our clients and respondents are facing. Previously, we saw more digital readiness or risk being closer to the top than cost. And budget has become a real focus for clients. How do I manage my budget? How do I achieve my purpose and vision with the constraints that are being put on me has become really challenging for them. And then lastly, when we look at in the four quadrants of the themes, there was something about transparency and regulatory developments. So I'm sure most of the audience have heard about things like BEPS 2.0. We're seeing things like in the ESG developments, all the reporting, additional taxes, plastic taxes, the carbon border adjustment mechanism. All these sorts of regulatory changes that are coming out are changing how tax functions need to operate. E-invoicing came out as the number one challenge. When you look at what BEPS is doing, we saw, I think it was 83% of the clients said that they need to make somewhere between a moderate and a significant change to the underlying data that they have in order to meet their BEPS 2.0 compliance obligations. That's a fairly substantial amount of data wrangling and data manipulation. And then finally, you had 56% have said that they now voluntarily disclose total taxes paid, which is it's been a trend we've been seeing over the years. When I was in-house, we'd been doing that, I think, since 2005, 2006, and we were seen as trailblazing. It's now becoming the norm. But that, again, is an enormous exercise rooted in data and capability.
I guess that makes sense in the light of everything we see in the world changing. So the interesting question now is, how are companies responding to that?
Yeah, it's no surprise. They're transforming. They're going through transformation journeys. We see 54% of the respondents saying, we are going to transform our tax and finance operating model. One of the key things that they're looking to accomplish and achieve is they want to start to free their people up to deliver more value. So get them out of the mundane, the transactional, the compliance activity, and get them to partner with their business, becoming strategic partners to the business, more involved in the strategy, more market-facing, so that they can drive value. But to do that as well, in order to enable that and to free that up, that part of that transformation is driving them towards a co-sourcing or a managed service environment. So again, 59% of the companies surveyed said that they are looking at additional co-sourcing over the next 24 months. So the trend is still heavily driving towards what more can we outsource, what do we push into that mode, how do we use that within our operating model.
Yeah. That makes perfect sense as well, yeah. So what are the benefits? Why managed services? Just
That's a really good question. I think we had a conversation with a client a while back, and his simple view was compliance isn't my objective, transformation is my objective. Mm-hmm. So I think in the managed services construct and the co-sourcing space, what we've seen is historically, when the practice started out years ago, when clients started to outsource elements of their compliance to us, it was about compliance, but it's moved into this transformation enablement capability that clients are looking for. So if you think about an operating model and across its kind of core dimensions of people, process, data, and technology, clients are looking to managed services to become an enabler or a capacitator, if I can use that word, of the operating model for the functions that are impacted, be they tax, finance, payroll, mobile people. Yeah. So when you dive into that and you start unpacking that, from a people perspective, they're looking to manage service providers and essentially looking for a provider that has a sustainable pool or access to a sustainable pool of people. For us, it's our business. We have to have the people. We've got 50, 60,000 people working in our compliance practice, probably more now. So they're looking to have that talent available to them where they need it, when they need it, with the right skill set. When I was in-house, we'd have, we'll call them jacks of all trades, someone who might do a bit of VAT, a bit of corporate income tax, a bit of transfer pricing. In the managed service model, you move into, well, when I need 20% of an FTE for VAT, I have immediate access to it. When I need 10% of a transfer pricing FTE, I have immediate access to it. So on the people dimension, looking for that sustainability, scalability, and flexibility. When you go into process, it's more around access to leading practice processes that can drive efficiency and effectiveness. And that's one of the areas where we see if we can get the internal processes of our clients working better, when they connect them into our managed service process, that frees up the in-house talent and capability to start to add the value we were talking about from a strategic perspective. From a data perspective, they're looking for managed service providers to have a data-driven methodology and approach, which we do in our own practice, but essentially starting to say, well, if we can work with the data better, structure the data better, gather the data better, and govern the data better, that's going to improve the quality of my compliance. It's going to help me to reduce risk. But at the same time, if I do that in a really structured way, I get access to data that I can manipulate and use for reporting and drive real valuable insights for my business. So there's a lot of rich data in what we do for tax that can be used in other parts of the business for planning, and not tax planning perspective, actually business planning perspective. It can drive real value and insights. And then finally, if you look at technology, they're looking for access to market-leading technologies at a lower total cost of ownership. So we build the technology once that underpins our managed service offerings, but then we reuse it multiple times over multiple clients. So in the way our commercial proposition would work, it gets costed, the big central cost gets shared or spread over many people. The type of technology we're using or technology strategy we're following would be identical to if you had to do that in-house. And if you go in-house, then you've got the cost of build, cost of test, cost of license, cost of maintenance, etc. So looking to work with a provider that can help them there as well to optimize their costs. So I think if you had to sum it up, we definitely see growing demand and continued demand for managed services. Companies are really looking to the managed service value proposition to help them with transformation, enablement of their functions in order to have something that's sustainable and can help them to drive long-term and sustain long-term value for their organizations.
Interesting. So what I'm hearing is there's quite a lot of change going on in the market. So I guess, Virginie, it probably has impacted how we look at managed services.
Yes, absolutely. And I think if you look at it, historically, managed services was very much around low complexity, transactional type of activities. So things that you would put in shared service center, AP, AR, for example. But because of the cost pressure, the talent pressure, the technology pressure that Craig was mentioning, we've seen a real evolution. And that evolution has been in three directions. The first one, I think, was in terms of the depth of managed services. So I was talking about those back office type of activities. Managed services have moved to mid-office function and even to front office function. So if I look at tax processes, for example, one can argue that tax compliance is already a mid-office type of activity that lends itself to managed services. But it has gone further. If you're thinking about tax accounting and reporting, if you're thinking about BEPS, so more complex topics, if you're thinking about tax controversy, which is often delivered by the front office. So the managed services elements have really moved up the value chain. That's number one. The second one, and it's a direct result, has been around the breadth of the services. So typically, again, IT, finance, tax, but we're seeing a variety of managed services exploding. So global mobility, for example, payroll managed services, we're seeing as well legal managed services. So again, around that extra added value that we can bring to our clients. And the third element is around the scalability and the flexibility. I think, Craig, you alluded to it a second ago, but 20 years ago, I think it was a binary world. It was in-source, outsource, and that was about it. Where today you have every shade of managed services in between. So you have some co-sourcing, some incubation, and alongside a contract route, you see those shifts there, where activities outsourced, taken back in-house, nurtured, taken back, yeah? So that flexibility, that agility has been very key, and it makes us a very relevant partner because we're keeping close to the business and the strategic objectives. And if I look at that evolution in the context then of our client and their expectations, the expectations have very much shifted from process-oriented type of activities, so timeliness, process efficiencies, moving to an area of added value. Can you please mitigate risk? Can you please identify opportunities and maximize those opportunities for us? And today, we're working mainly with clients around data and technology. So that goes back to the AI agenda that Craig was mentioning.
Makes sense. So if we maybe now, since Thilo, you mentioned in the beginning already, Acceleron, one of the big cases. So maybe we just take these trends now, go a bit deeper into, what does it actually look like? And you just tell us a bit about that company in that case.
Yes, Acceleron, formerly it is known as ABB turbocharging. What they are manufacturing turbochargers for very large diesel engines, right? Diesel engines usually being in ships or in very large power stations. Now, if you have done a cruise, maybe, or you're likely to do one, there's a very high likelihood that there is an ABB turbocharger built in this ship, right? And ships are basically operating between ports, and uptime is crucial. So when ABB built that business, they basically built in every harbor where the ships are berthing, they built a service station, right, to maintain those turbochargers. That was easy for them because they have a globally very wide area of operating. Now in 2020, they decided to divest that business. Basically, they were going fully electric and said, okay, this diesel engines thing is moving out. And then they had the challenge how to operate a finance and tax function in 50 plus countries, and that in a very short time frame, setting it up, right? So that was the difficulty. So when we then came in and we said, look, what are the options? And Acceleron was, first they thought they can build it up themselves, which ABB has done in the past. They said, look, we are looking for a managed services model. Can you make us an offer to build basically shared services at the time when it's really required, so that we can then move in and you run it, right? And I was talking to the CFO, he mentioned at the heart, Acceleron is a services business. Definitely it's 5% of the revenues coming from services. If they can focusing on their interaction with their global customers, with reliable finance data, they can focus on innovation, and that helps to grow the top line. Yep. And when now looking to in the numbers, from the IPO in 2022 till today, it has really super increased. And when top line growth is happening, we are also happy, right? And I think that is the basis for a good model. I think we have now a services model built, which is basically capable for kind of any type of business worldwide, running in 50 countries globally.
Okay. Really nice. Could you maybe also describe a bit more, Thilo, like what are these services, the exact services that we're actually delivering for Acceleron?
Yes, sure. So we have built basically the model in 3 pillars. So one is accounting, and that is really basic bookkeeping, procure to pay, order to cash, record to report. And then also on tax compliance, so basically VAT compliance, direct tax, you name it, basically everything. And the third pillar is around implementation. It's basically, on the first place, building those 2 pillars we just discussed, making that happen, but also supporting Acceleron in setting up their S/4HANA system and helping them in some other topics like lease accounting, treasury operations, these kind of topics.
Okay. I mean, you also mentioned, it's obviously a global business, it's operating across many, many countries. So how do you deliver these services across the globe?
Yeah, so we have basically, we are using our, I would say, state-of-the-art delivery centers. We are using Bangalore in India, Manila, Philippines, and Buenos Aires in Argentina to service most of it. But we have also some, I would say, really complex countries. I mean, like Brazil, Greece, Turkey, right? You name it. And for those countries, we are operating locally. And that is quite an interesting model. So we have also local experts in almost all the countries worldwide. And that gives access to experts, and that is great. Additionally, we have been asked, how can you help us potentially to service really the very small countries? Small countries means low number of revenues, or between $5 and $10 million revenues. And we said, look, you don't need your high-cost SAP solution. We can service you with our own EY finance platform based on Microsoft technologies. And that gives a kind of a model which is really interesting, because most of the companies have tail-end countries, right, or tail-end businesses, which are relatively small but still need a lot of support, right? And that is where we can support. And I think this is something which other providers, the typical ones, maybe not have. And we have really a fantastic model to support our customers. Yeah.
Excellent insights. Thanks to the 3 of you. We're almost at the end of the session, but we'll take time for 2 questions, I think, really briefly. And that is, I mean, you just talked, big complex organizations. Would you say managed services is best suited for these multinational, big complex organizations, or what's the right size actually when thinking about managed service?
I think we are, the beauty is, right, that we are running, I would say managed services, it's very small to very large, right? So it's really a continuum. Where we have seen, and in my former experience, it was usually more the large topics, right? That makes it, of course, really industrial. But we have a model which is scalable, and that makes that things very relevant to most of the businesses. Yeah.
Makes sense. So maybe the other question then is, how do you measure success of a managed service if it's so multifaceted?
I think that's an interesting question. I think there are 2 dimensions to that. There's the strategic impact that it has, and we talked about transformation earlier. The second dimension would be more operational success. So from a strategic impact perspective, it depends on the nature of the service, but we talked about how clients are looking to release more of their people's time to add value to the business. So you may have metrics around what is that impact in terms of the amount of capacity that I've been able to release from the managed service in order to refocus on strategic value-adding activities. Depending on how deep you go, you could possibly even start to connect some of that to top-line growth. Thilo mentioned top-line growth at Acceleron as an example. So it's understanding, I think, what your starting point and baseline is, and then knowing where you're wanting to get to, and then putting the measures in place around that. Operationally is a little bit more simple. Typically, if you're talking about tax compliance, it'll be deadlines met, quality of returns, lack of controversy. There are different KPIs that we work on with our clients. But for me, the kind of coming back to that core message, transformation is what really gets me excited, and where I think a lot of clients are wanting to focus. How do we measure that transformational impact and success? Focusing on getting your head around that is really important.
Right. So then maybe as one last question, really last question. Is there any industries, any sector that are specifically, doubling down on managed services, or what's the answer to that one?
I think this is a good question. So we debated that. And I would say there is not an easy answer to say, oh, this is this industry, because in real terms, it's applicable for all industries. We also see good progress in government. And we had the talks about challenges, right? Talent is happening everywhere, right? So we have, I think now we see it really that it's the future of our business is managed services, and that is not based on our own wish. It's based on customer demand, right? So I think we are good set for the future.
Really good. Thank you three, Virginie, Craig, Thilo. Thanks very much for making time. If the people have more questions, obviously keep them coming. We'll make sure we dispatch them to these three here. And then we are back in about 35 minutes at 3 o'clock with the topic around sustainability. So hope to see you back, or actually you see us back rather. And up to the next session. Thanks for joining.